Slides are all in the wrong order. I'll get this probably the best. Secure objects and MOQ features. Okay, welcome everyone to Madrid and welcome to MOQ. This is our first session of 2. We will have another one on Thursday. Up here you see the mascot for Atletico Madrid, one of the football teams here in Madrid. According to Gemini, Real Madrid does not have a mascot, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do on Thursday. I welcome suggestions over email. As always, this session is being recorded. This is the IETF note well. It covers the intellectual property and code of conduct, the intellectual property considerations of you participating, as well as the code of conduct. If you've not read it before, I encourage you to find it on the internet and read it. If you have read it before, just as a quick reminder, if there are any intellectual property, if there's any intellectual property claims associated with what is being discussed, you are obligated to disclose that. And in terms of code of conduct, just be nice to each other. Don't act like you're on Twitter, as I say. Just behave like you're having dinner with somebody. Okay, as usual, we're using MeetEcho here in this in-person interim. That is the tool for in-person meeting, rather. Excuse me. Use that to join the queue. If you are using the full client, please mute it. If you're here in person, and turn off your video and audio unless you are speaking. There is a little bit of latency if you're out there in remote world, so go ahead and turn on your mic a little bit before you begin to speak. If you're in a back and forth, just leave it on. And if you're remote, you should probably use a headset because of some of the noise cancellation properties of this tool. Okay, the agenda has been bashed in the past half hour or so. The summary of this is ABR is moving back to Thursday. Colin and Suhas have graciously agreed to forfeit some of their agenda time on some previously discussed documents so we could have more editor time. And so some things are moving around here. We're going to have some issue discussion today. And then tomorrow, we're going to talk about the other adopted drafts other than MOQT and have more editor's time, as well as a talk about ABR from Ian. Would anyone like to bash the agenda? Okay, having heard nothing, we have some scribes. Thank you, Emily and Suhas, for agreeing to take notes. As always, I'll remind you that we do not need a verbatim copy of what happened today. There is a recording for that. Let's just record the key points so that people can skim it quickly if they don't want to watch the whole video. Okay, just a general status update for the working group. We have two documents now adopted, new documents, and we've rolled several versions of MOQ transport since Bangkok. Alan has an extended talk about what's changed because it's substantial. We'll have a talk about warp tomorrow, and then LOC Mo has graciously agreed to send an email. I think it's already out of the list. Is it out of the start? No, it's not. Well, there will be an email shortly summarizing what's happened there. So if you're interested in LOC, please take a look for that email. Okay, let's move to the first agenda time, which I want to time box pretty firmly. Let me just introduce this in 30 seconds or less. A number of people remarked that the media over QUIC name is a misnomer. I'm not going to attempt to replicate that case here. There are two reasons you might not want to change the name of MOQ transport. Specifically, we're not going to change the name of the working group. That's way too hard. We could change the name of MOQ transport. Two reasons not to do that are, number one, that you like the name. Number two is that you think it's too late. The MOQ brand has achieved some some visibility out in the industry. And we're going to take a quick vote on whether or not to even open this subject, which we would do on the list. And if, but before we have that vote, I just invite people to say in 30 seconds or less what they feel about this subject. We're not going to discuss an actual replacement name at this time. The issue is the current name good enough given the current maturity of what we're doing, or should we open the subject of how to change it? So if anyone would like to approach the mic, now would be your time. And I'm ringing the gong at 30 seconds. Go ahead, Colin.
I still think, actually, in terms of deployment, we're extremely early on this. I don't think it's too late to change the name, but I do 100% agree with we should just decide this soon and be done with it. And I think that the right approach to doing it, if we decided to open the subject, would be for us to set up a bunch of for us to do the usual sort of process you go for finding good names. You get a professional organization, you work with them to give them the qualities you're working in the name. They go and look for things that are unique and have the right properties that you've desired of them, come back with a list of possibilities, and then have the working group use the usual consensus process to get to choosing one of those possibilities. And I think we could do that in a very professional way if we wanted. It's very un-IETF, but it's how most names are chosen for most things.
Thanks, Colin. Will?
Yeah, Will Loakamai. I'm actually fine with the name. I think I'm a big fan that MOQ is more than media, but I think over time, and even at this point, the media part of MOQ will become obscured. MOQ is already a brand name for the last 2 years. People know it. We've established mindshare. I would hate to lose that mindshare and start all over again. So I think MOQ's a fine overlay name, and not necessarily. We can go through the process, find a better one, but I'm okay with it as it is.
Thank you, Will. Suhas?
I'm a proponent of changing the name just because I've been talking to too many different people with different application requirements, and every time it takes them to clarify that media or QUIC is not just media, it's more of a PubSub real-time sensitive protocol, and it helps to convey that in the name. So I would be, if we can come up with a good name, I would be supporting that.
Ted?
Ted Hardy, I would be really curious to find out if Cullen used that same process for picking his own children's name, just since it seems so fascinating. I could recount to you the program my husband and I used to generate names to pick our own child's name. But in short, I don't think this is too late. I also don't think there's any point in it. I point to our delightful friends over at the HTML transport HTTP, where nobody gives a rats anything that the H is supposed to be HTML. Just call it MOQ and drop media over QUIC, and you're done. It's a short, easy to remember name, and if people ask what it stands for, refer to our friends at QUIC and say nothing.
I was going to echo exactly what Ted said. Keep it as MOQ. Could be multicast over QUIC. Could be many things over QUIC. Whatever you want. It's just MOQ. That's good enough.
Alan Frindell. I just wanted to point to our friends in the MASK working group and note that they did not create a protocol called MASK, and they retained their brand. So that's also a possibility. Like, we can name the protocol whatever we want and still be MOQ.
All right, thank you all for keeping it brief. I do not want to spend a lot of time on this today. We're going to put up a question. If I can work the tool here. There it is. Okay, if you haven't already joined the Meet Echo, that would be a great time to do it. There are little QR codes all over the room. So if you think we should start a discussion about the new name, not today, then you can click yes. If you think the name is great, including, I suppose, just changing it to MOQ, or if you think it's too late to change the name even though you hate the name, please click no. I thought this was the kind of question where everyone can have an opinion, but somebody has no opinion. Is anyone still struggling with entering Meet Echo or with voting? Looks like things are stabilizing. Okay, it seems that I'm going to stop the vote now. Let the record show that we have 12 votes to seek a new name and 29 to stick with what we have. We'll take this to the list, but it seems like there's, well, Magnus and I will talk about the consensus implications of what we just saw here today. All right. So having concluded that, we're a few minutes ahead, which is great because we have plenty of issues to discuss with whatever time we can save. And first up will be Alan to talk about updates to the MOQ draft since IETF 122. Can you run the slides?
I'll let you guys drive. Ooh, those are bright lights. Oh, hi, everybody. I'm Alan. I'm not a chair. Next slide. Okay, so we published 3 new drafts since we last met in Bangkok. Actually, these names were generated by one of the participants who asked AI to summarize the changes, and I thought they were kind of funny. So it called Draft 11 the Great Refactoring. It called Draft 12 Feature Expansion. That is our current interop target. And then I named Draft 13. We cut this because there was a draft deadline. There's not a lot in Draft 13 that's different from 12. But I'll walk through the detailed changes. Next slide. Okay, so I kind of broke this into features and sort of other things. So one of the biggest wire changes in Draft 11 is that we took what used to be a subscribe ID and made it into a request ID. So that is now in the 5 verbs that you can send, 5 actions: subscribe, announce, fetch, track status, and subscribe namespaces all need to send a request ID. And this was done to prevent rapid reset style attacks against any of the messages, and it makes correlation a little bit easier between requests and responses. We now use sort of evens and odds style. So I think the client sends even request IDs and the server sends odd request IDs. So that's in. We also took what had been just a simple string authentication or info parameter and gave it a little bit of structure. And then we also added a compression scheme for tokens if you're going to use the same token in multiple requests. And there's a system that's very similar to HPAC. Martin calls it MOQ. He also pointed out this is a fertile ground for new issues. We did get a little bit of interoping with auth tokens over the weekend. So some people are catching up there. There is now a forward flag for subscriptions, which can be either 0 or 1. So if you would like to subscribe to something, but then either temporarily pause it or resume it, or if you'd like to do an initial subscription to a relay to indicate that you might subscribe, you might be interested in those objects in the future and have some sort of pre-warm behavior, this forward flag now exists. There's a new mechanism for joining fetch. So when you, and this is done for ABR switching algorithms, articulated a need to do this. So the ability to join a new track at a specific named group in the past or future, I forget. That's there. And there's a mechanism that you can use to indicate the size of a gap in the group ID space. If you're the original publisher and you intentionally put a group ID gap, you can signal that in the data plane, and that is useful for fetch caches to understand that when there's a gap that they don't need to try to figure out if there's an object there or not. So those are some of the headline features in Draft 11, but there's a whole bunch more. Next slide. So other things we did. So we decided to limit all control messages to be at most 64K. And because of that, we changed the message length from a varant to 16-bit. In retrospect, that was probably not a great idea to do before we had adopted ALP and version negotiation, because if you want to negotiate setup before and after Draft 11, it's a huge pain. But we're here. And we have some new compression features in the data plane. You can use some bits in the subgroup header type and datagram type that will let you omit certain the object header properties and use defaults or infer them in different ways. We align the serialization of the object extensions which go in the data plane and the parameters that go in the control plane to use the same serialization format, at least for now. And that uses an even odd scheme. Odds are variable length and there's a length for the thing, and even numbered parameters and extensions are just a single variant. Although there's some discussion and maybe a PR coming to update that system. Let's see, we clarified how subscription filters work. It was a little ambiguous before. We added back the next group filter when you're subscribing. We changed we made a bunch of updates and clarifications around how fetch works. And there's even more. So draft 11 was a big one. Next slide. The community was thrilled with all these changes. That's Ian and I avoiding the angry mob of implementers who are still trying to catch up to draft 11. All right, next. Okay, but then we cut draft 12. So if you remember from Bangkok, we spent a lot of time talking about publish, and that was what we spent a lot of the time between that meeting and this meeting in our interims, working through the details of publish. And as soon as we had that in, we basically cut draft 12 so that people could start interacting with it. So we think we've solved this publisher speaks first use case. And if you remember the details of the discussion from Bangkok, we had talked about whether or not we were going to actually do wildcard subscribe separately or together, and we decided to sort of do it all together. And I have some subsequent slides that show the flow for how publish works, but effectively you now can use, you can now have this wildcard subscribe action that I think people have wanted for a long time also. As part of those changes, we changed how track alias works. And this is like a full circle for the group because the very original proposal was that it was chosen by the publisher, and then we spent a long time talking about it in like 2023. And then we made the subscriber choose it, and then now the publisher chooses it again. But hopefully we're done. Publisher was going to require that anyway, and it's a simpler scheme than the one that we talked about. There were some more even and odd nonsense that we talked about in Bangkok, but it's just a number. It's just chosen by the publisher, and that's it. We changed matching in relays from, it used to be sort of, you had to match exact namespaces in order to route a subscribe to an announce. And now, and that exact matching was also something we debated early on, but before we gave structure to namespaces using the tuple thing. And then we looked at this in the current context and said that we decided it was okay to do relay matching on a tuple field prefix rather than the exact tuples. And we also enabled, you can now send authentication parameters in setup. So if you want to use some tokens to determine if someone is even allowed to connect, then you can now accept those in setup. Next slide. Okay, so this just walks through the publish flow for people who haven't seen it. So it starts, a publisher connects to like a relay, for example, and it says it's gonna publish a track. You only publish an individual track. It's in some namespace. It has some name. Next, what happened there? Okay, fine. That's good. All right, so then a subscriber will come to that relay, and it will say, I would like to subscribe to a namespace, and it gives that namespace it's interested in. And then the relay will find all of the announces that match that namespace, and also all the tracks that have been published that match that namespace, and forward those to the subscriber. So in this case, there's just one published at the relay that matches, and it gets forwarded to the subscriber. Next. And if a second publisher connects to the relay and it publishes, then that will also get forwarded to that subscriber. And if a new subscriber joined it issued a subscribe namespace, it would get both of the publishes for both track B and C at the same time. So this is the publish flow. I think one of the nice things that came out of it that's not really shown here is that whether a subscription is established via publish or via subscribe, once it's established, it's completely symmetric. So you can use subscribe update, you can use unsubscribe. It's really just about like how the data starts flowing. That's different. Next slide. Other things we changed in 12, more compression options in the data plane, more improvements in fetch mechanics. We we described what we call a malformed track, which you can think about in HTTP world. There's a bunch of ways you can make a malformed HTTP request. And that spec says, like, if you get a malformed request, this is what you should do with it. So we didn't make an exhaustive list, but we listed out a few ways that you can construct something that would be malformed, and we prescribed an action to take if you get one. And we also removed the word latest from almost everywhere in the draft and replaced it with largest. So this is trying to be unambiguous about time versus the like sequence number or the group ID and object ID of a particular object. So it should be unambiguous everywhere that it's not necessarily time-based. I think that's the last slide. Next one, might be questions. Oh no, 13. Okay, so draft 13 has only one substantive change. We took the track status, which was kind of its own little special message before, and we replaced it so it now exactly mirrors the format that's in subscribe. And the model here is like HTTP head exactly mirrors HTTP get. And you just get that in HTTP, you just get the headers, but not the data. Track status is the same. It's just like a subscribe, and you just get the equivalent of a subscribe OK or subscribe error, but no data. We also renamed subscribe announces back to subscribe namespace because it solicits both announce and publish now. That's everything in 13. Next. That's it. Does anybody have any questions about what has happened in the last 3 months? Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alan. Next up will be Suhas to talk about privacy passover MOQ, or maybe it's Cullen that's going to talk about it. Looks like Cullen.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have time. Yeah.
Okay, so we are getting to the point of starting to talk a little bit more about the security stuff in MOQ, and one of those being the tokens. And we've been doing a fair amount of work. Alan just mentioned a bunch of work that happened since last session on tokens. And I want to talk about a different token a little bit, which is the privacy pass token. So my click or no click.
Nope. Okay. Do it the hard way.
Yep.
So I want to be very clear, first of all, this is not an alternative CAT. I think we should totally do CAT. There's a ton of use cases that need CAT, and that's the tokens they'd be using. This is an alternative for some other types of use cases. So next slide. So with lots of our types of tokens, the way they are, they're very linkable and they track across it. And this privacy pass token was designed to try and deal with issues where you don't want to reveal all the details of who's accessing what exactly, but you still want to make sure that people can get paid or whatever it is. So, the content provider needs some sort of authorization guarantees, including the people running the relays need to do things like who is paying for whatever traffic we're transiting or caching right now, without necessarily, and they are going to inherently see something about being fetched, but that doesn't need to be fully linked back to the other things. So privacy pass tokens provide this type of option that we can do this. So next slide. Now, of course, once we start doing this, just give the most hand-wavy sort of general way that this works, okay? And it can work different ways, but this would be sort of the atypical flow is there's somebody who's going to attest something about this token, like you're a real subscriber and you're authorized to get this specific data. There's going to be somebody that helps, and that's sort of the request one here. There's going to be somebody, some different identity, possibly in some cases be sort of the same, that helps blind that token so that it can no longer be correlated with the actual user that really did something on the first request. And then there's the third place where you hand this blinded token to somebody who's going to make as a relying party and is going to make a decision based on this token, like I'm willing to do it or not do it, which would be the relays or possibly the original publisher in our case. So that's the sort of general architecture here. And requests 1 and 2 are not going over MOQ in any way. They just work over HTTP or whatever ways you use to do all your tokens today. And number 3, yes, this would be passed in MOQ, just like we passed the CAT tokens. So next slide. So to do this, the main thing that we need to talk about is what's in the tokens that says what they're authorized for, right? So next slide. Next slide. Let's skip this flow. Same flow I explained. Okay, so in this context, we need to, set up a scope basically. And so this is going to determine the granularity of what we can authorize. And it's probably the most interesting part of any design of how to use a privacy pass token in this. So the current proposal on this is that it would have the operation. So you can individually say whether somebody's allowed to publish or not allowed to, or only allowed to subscribe, that type of thing. And it would give us the track name with wildcarding support. So you have the example down here, you're allowed to subscribe to some sort of namespace. Next slide, and that would be tuples. So let's get the little details. So you can either provide a full namespace and track name that has to be an exact match, or you can provide a limited number of tuples and wildcard the tuples after that. Okay, so that's basically, but you can't wildcard a tuple in the middle and then provide some tuples after it in the namespace. You can only sort of wildcard the end. That's the proposal we have right now.
Alan, do you have a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Why is your proposal so bad? No. The clarifying question is, it's represented there as a concatenated string. Is it actually a string, or are there?
No.
Okay.
No. It would be able to represent all. It would exactly match the namespace. We just never know how to represent these on slides. So I put slashes as the things between the tuples of the namespace, which I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong way to draw it on the slide. Who knows? But yeah, it would match. Not this, but namespaces as you would expect. So look, this is the most interesting point of this whole talk right now. So if people have sort of feedback on whether they think that's enough, whether this is about the right level of granularity to start off with or not, definitely be interested in that sort of feedback. And I can't see any cues, so you guys will have to warn me. Okay.
Does this match? We saw a similar presentation on CAT, which I've flushed all the details of, but isn't it kind of the same problem in terms of what goes in the CAT token should be similar concepts, at least, to what goes in this token? And
I mean, CAT tokens include this level, but they have a lot more too. Like CAT tokens could say over this time span and things like this, which, I mean, these tokens have a lifetime validity, but they don't have the type of narrow that. These tokens, I'm not proposing we could do geographic regions, for example, which you can do in CAT. So this is I mean, maybe Will wants to say more, but I think this is a deep subset of what you can do in a CAT token as well as far as flexibility goes.
Okay, but at least as far as like the way CAT.
This part of it would be the same,
okay.
I think. Yeah, or should.
As long as they're the same,
Yeah,
that seems like it makes sense to me.
Yeah, just echoing, this is the same as CAT, and that's awesome. And I think within MOQ, we're generic enough that we can accept both these token types. So I think this is excellent, and I support it.
Okay. Look, if they're not the same, obviously the direction is to keep them the same. We will make them the same. Yeah, it's intended to be the same as CAT. Okay, next slide. Oh, sorry.
Ben, go ahead.
Hi, Ben Schwartz, Meta. So at what stage in the flow are these transmitted on the wire? Is this transmitted during attestation, during issuance, or during use?
So they're only sent over MOQ during use. The other stages would be done over HTTP. And specifically when we use them in MOQ, same as CAT token, they're done when we send a request like subscribe or publish. They're not done on every data packet that's flowing once that subscription's established. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So then there must be some other metadata that also that allows the relay to assess whether this privacy pass token covers the scope that's being requested by the user.
So that this name that we're talking about right now, that I've sort of represented vaguely like an HTML URL, but it's not. That is also sent in the same subscribe request. I mean, that's what you're subscribing to in the subscribe request, or what you're going to publish to in the publish request. And so whatever's there obviously has to match the token with the wildcard of the token covering whatever the actual name is, to put it in a URI context.
Okay, thanks. I think my general reminder here is that this information has entropy that can be used to identify users if they have, for example, a distinctive combination of subscriptions. So we should be careful about disclosing any information that isn't already disclosed by the rest of the MOQ requests.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, just to hit I totally agree. You're a very good point. And I mean, our sort of just to back up of the overall security model, the relays of course are going to see this information about the namespaces that people are subscribing to and the names of things they're subscribing to. That's all carried inside the TLS session. So other network entities aren't going to see it, but the relays are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that into queue?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, next slide. There's some details of the sort of token structure that, not the token structure, it's a token structure. I'm not quite sure what happened to formatting there. Not even sure that's my typo. I blame software. Okay. We build this in the usual way. We'll get a PR and get into the details of it and get reviewed by people who are experts on privacy paths and things like that. But this is sort of the gist of it here. Next slide. Yeah, and so this is pretty much some of the benefits of when you might want to use this versus a cat token or something else. And really with that, I am, it's sort of into the presentation. Go next slide. I'm just looking for some feedback on what exactly are the next steps here. I think I would like to move forward with this token. I think it's a one that has some great properties and we would use in some cases. And I think it also sort of, exercises us making sure that we actually meet our goal of being able to be flexible and support more than one type of token. So next slide. Yeah, my call to action here is I think we should adopt CAT as a working group draft and adopt this. So there we go. Any other feedback or input on this from people?
Alan Frendel, I'm just assuming no one's asking for any transport changes. This is just like these drafts explain what you use the already specified transport mechanisms for.
Yeah, I think, maybe we'll find some bugs, but my belief is the current draft has enough flexibility to support CAT and this simultaneously. We'll see what that looks like when deployed.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. End of that one.
Thanks, Colin.
So I would like some feedback from the group of whether I should keep working on this or not. That is something I am asking for. So,
would anyone like to approach the mic and give a thumbs up or down?
Ted Hardy, I think it's a great idea. I think there are definite use cases for this. My only concern is that somebody might start pushing this to have all of the features of CAT. I don't think that's reasonable given how the attestation works. So I think an eventual draft will have to explain why the limits are there, but it seems like good work.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that a lot of the actual use cases that drive a lot of those things that use those properties of CAT would never make sense in a privacy pass context. So I'm pretty comfortable with this. So, okay.
Eric?
Yep. Eric Kinnear Apple way back up here.
Upper right corner.
Stack right. Thanks. I couldn't help but notice as we were going through some of these slides that your not quite a URL thing looks an awful lot like a URI. And how much of this is we didn't want HTTP, but we're now building all of the different features like authentication that we didn't want because it was too much work. Is this are there more of these coming? Are we going to add a lot of the other things too?
I think that I think that we easily could move this into to be a formal URN quite easily, and maybe that would be the right thing to do. I'm going to do 180 after whatever Ted says at the mic in just a second, but I don't. I mean, that might be we are basically at this point. We roughly have a URN at some level, but the way we got there, we slowly expanded into that. I don't know that there's a big difference of that. It would be nice if nothing else, if we had a common format for writing these down, particularly when they're being written to a log. You know, a common recommendation on that would be good as a minimum, and maybe we should define a URN. I don't think it'd be hard to do. Ted, you want to?
Yeah, that was.
I'm going to lock the queue
Whoa.
quickly soon. So
that was actually going to be my follow-up question. Was I don't necessarily know that this is a moment to be like, OMG, let's go back to the beginning and mess with stuff, because that seems like a very poor choice in this moment. But maybe it should actually be a real URI URN. Like, can we at least reuse some of the building blocks?
Ted Hardy with a highly personal opinion. I think it's actually much more flexible as a tuple, and that it's just an accident of the choice of separator that Cullen chose to make it look like a URI that's making you think it has the characteristics of a URI, which just goes to show you the kind of shape of our brains and nothing actually about the identifier. In particular, I don't see why you would think this is a URN. URNs are a very specific subclass of URIs, which have the characteristic that there is a single issuer which manages the entire namespace, or that there is a cryptographic assurance that two different groups can generate these in a way that is utterly collision-free. And you're not going to get it out of these tuples because you definitely will have cases where some elements of the tuples being unmanaged will collide. So I strongly suggest that you take the other part of the proposal and say, let's come up with a common format for representing the tuples so that they can be logged and so that drafts are consistent when, or presentations are consistent. But it really isn't a URI. And some of what you're assuming derives from a URI are almost certainly not there in some elements of these tuples. So let's not revisit that. Let's instead move forward to having a common not URI representation of these for logs and others. Thanks.
Ted, totally agree. When I think of it as URN, I'm including the relay you connect to's URI as part of getting there. Anyway, I agree with your conclusion, and it makes what I said irrelevant. Yeah.
Nothing based on the DNS can serve as a URN because you can sell the domain name or transfer the domain name without other consequence. As a result, you are never able to use the DNS as the basis of a URN.
Melzanani, I think it's Eric brings up a good point that we should bring up on the list, but it's independent of this draft. This whole namespaces versus URNs has been percolating in the group for forever. I think it'd be good to have a list discussion about all those benefits. It has nothing to do with this draft, nothing to do with just authentication or anything else. It permeates all the protocol verbs. So we probably should have an open list discussion about that.
Okay, thanks everyone. Good discussion there. I think we'll let this germinate on the list for a few weeks, and then Magnus and I will talk about doing an adoption call for both this and CAT once people had a chance to sort of digest and read these documents. Are you also presenting OCSF?
No.
Okay, Suhas, you're up.
I'll be talking about OCSF or MOQ, basically sending OCSF events based on OCSF or Open Cybersecurity Framework distributed over MOQ. So to set some context, what happened here is that when we discussed with a lot of cybersecurity folks within Cisco and outside, they're trying to solve a use case where they're going to distribute a lot of events coming across different endpoints, nodes in the network, switches and routers, and they want to send it all to a collector one place where they can collect and analyze. And they are seeing a lot of bottlenecks in the traditional systems. And when we discuss them about the MOQ, they see there's some benefits for using MOQ. And I'll be talking about why we should be doing this over MOQ. Next slide, please. Okay. Some of the pain points with the traditional system like HTTP or message queuing is that, as you can see in the architecture diagram here, the typical deployment is that you have SIEM events, like these are the nodes that generate these events, and they are all sent to a central broker, and the central broker will basically send it all the events to the analytics tools. So this causes few issues. One is that there's a high latencies because you don't want all of your like millions of events to be sent through a bottleneck like a broker or a tool. Or at the same time, it has limitations on how quickly you can respond to a threat, because unless you get all the events, you cannot react or respond to a threat. So in order to support more near real-time latencies to respond to any security threat, or to be able to identify various things happening in the system, that depends on caching within the network, MOQ became one of the natural places where we can use OCSF kind of cybersecurity events to be distributed. Next slide. So taking a small detour and explaining, talking about what OCSF is. OCSF defines a standard for cybersecurity event with a well-defined taxonomy. Next slide. So there, the OCSF schema defines a lot of other things. For our discussions, we talk about three different things that it defines. One is the event classes, categories, and profiles. The event classes, they basically identify the most basic elements in the schema, like someone opened the file, someone closed the file, someone logged into registry, log in and log out. And then there are categories which groups these kind of events into a domain, like system activity, for example, calculates, like reports all the things that happens with the files, your process execution, registry changes. Similarly, a network activity category would include all the event classes that would do HTTP requests, DNS queries, and those something like that. And there, this third thing called profiles. Profiles are like, if you're programmed in C++ or some other programming languages, they are like a mixing classes, wherein you can define these profiles that scan across multiple categories and events. For example, if you look at the host profile as an example here, where the device information that has the IP address of a device or an endpoint, it could be an IP address of a server running, or it could be a router or a switch. So adding this host profile on these events and category, that will let the security tools to query across various events and categories for anyone with a particular IP address. So these are the three main things within the OCF schema, which we think if we can support efficient distribution and caching mechanisms over MOQ, it will address some of the pain points that the use cases the cybersecurity folks are trying to solve. Next slide. Next slide, please. So we have what we have done is that we have used the hierarchical naming scheme that MOQ provides, and have a multidimensional track organization where we define tracks for event classes, where we define then tracks for categories and tracks for profiles. So for example, if you look at the event classes based tracks, the main thing that the namespace identifies is the things that are in bold, that this is for events, and you can identify a type of event class. If you look at the example below, it basically shows that, let's say a security or monitoring tool figures out there's something happening with respect to the endpoint West O2, that's the particular endpoint, and they want to go get more details about it. Then they can issue a fetch request saying that, get me all activities that are events, file-related events that happen in particular to that endpoint. And this allows you to get this specific fine-grained subscription. Next slide. On the other hand, the category tracks, as I talked about, they group a lot of events based on a domain. In this example, we can see that this category track basically identifies how can you get all the file-related events that happened across all my deployment and having certain properties. So this just looks, this something like this category 1 is called as the system activity, which includes the file-related events, process events, and registry events. So this could help us find out all the activities that happened in that category. Next slide. Again, mapping to our profiles, the profile tracks and the namespaces helps you identify querying some kind of questions or fetching the historical data based upon few examples that I have is that if a security profile can basically go and ask for, I'm seeing some patterns of an attack that looks like a mid-tray attack. Can I go to my router switch and request for all the tracks where that was published with profile security and track name being attacks? In the same way, someone who is interested in finding out all the events that are related to S3 access, they can go to a profile called cloud, and then that track would provide them information. So these profiles are already defined in OCF schema. This is not something that we are defining. We are basically providing a way for representing that taxonomy in MOQ. Next slide. So once we map the track, now we figure out how do we want to send the objects that specific to the OCSF tools. So the idea here is that we use a grouping strategy of group IDs being the time, as we do in media, where we have a time scale. And based on the type of the events or the granularity of the events can happen in, those groups can range from having repeated every 1 second or every 5 seconds. Again, it depends purely on the application. And the object payload itself will be a serialized form of the OCSF object, which could be JSON or message pack. And we do define some header metadata that goes along with it that identifies if some of this data are real time or some of this needs to be batched and sent.
Suhas, we're running out of time. If we're going to have
Almost one
discussion,
slide.
So, okay.
Next slide, please. Okay, just to summarize, there are a few problems we identify in the cybersecurity folks of today need that MOQ directly addresses, which is we need to be able to respond to threat in sub-second latency or near real time, which is not provided. It's not possible with the amount of scalable, the bottleneck with the scalability, and also not having a caching infrastructure means that all the events every time have to go to the one central analytics engine, which makes the major bottleneck. Having this kind of data distributed across various geographies would help to do selective subscription or also selective fetches. Good. Next slide. Yeah, I would like to get inputs on how do you want to proceed with this one, and how can we help our cybersecurity folks to use MOQ as the transport for this.
Thanks, Suhas. As people join the queue, I have one chair question. Is this, this is a basic question, but is this the same layer as Warp? Like an application on top of MOQ? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Alan Friedel, thanks, Suhas. This is very interesting. I have a few questions. One, if you roll quickly back to the where you had the namespaces and the names defined, I noticed that you had quite a bit. Yes, here you have quite a bit of structure in the namespace itself, but then it looks like you also have structure in your track name. Is there a reason why you didn't put that structure into the namespace?
It was more like trying to what kind of questions we can ask, especially when you subscribe to the namespace. And if the track name was a tuple, that would be much helpful. But we have a track name to be a single tuple, hence that's what it is.
But why wouldn't you first, just example, have a namespace that's like the same namespace you have, but then like activity or like this, I don't know what you want to call that thing before the slash in the track name, but just make that be one more tuple.
Definitely, that's possible, yeah.
Another question is, I assume this is all reliable data, so like the delivery timeout constructs and things like that in MOQ don't apply. So we're not talking about datagram delivery, but it's all just like a single subgroup per group.
Yeah, I'm not went into detail about the subgroups and those kind of things, but I would assume something like that. And also because we have the caching, these depend on distributed caching more than the centralized caching. So things are still in those nodes, like either it can be a Wi-Fi access point or in the router. You still have those things on the nodes there, so you can fetch it later too.
And then the one of the, I mean, in terms of whether we would adopt this or not, like I think, are there other? It's like almost a dispatch question. Like, are there 2 or 3 different people who want to implement in this particular thing. And I think once we have that signal that those people are like, yes, we need the standard, then like that may make sense.
Thank you. Ian.
Ian Sweat, Google. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I just had one question, which is kind of, and maybe I missed it. I'm not clear what the asks of the MOQ working group are in terms of like, it looks like MOQ actually works pretty well for this use case, and maybe we don't need to add too much more functionality, which is not to say we shouldn't adopt it, but like, you know, I would say the adoption is more urgent if we need to like dramatically change MOQ to accommodate this use case. So.
Yeah, that's the question, basically a chair question, but this is one of the applications which the cybersecurity folks came to us asking like, how can we do it? And this MOQ working group felt like a natural place for it.
I'm going to close the queue soon.
Mosenetti, to answer Ian's question, I think it's about these use cases, make a lot of sense for what, we see from, providers like Splunk. The question about whether or not IETF would be interested in is, would, somebody else using Datadog or New Relic or something else have a similar need, and would there ever be a reason to interoperate those formats? If this is all within one vendor's ecosystem, you don't need any MOQ standardization, right? You don't need a warp profile if you're not going to have different, entities that care about the formats that are not under the same control. But if they are under, different, vendors' controls, then it does make sense to have a MOQ working group draft that says, here's how you should do it to interoperate. So I think the real question is, are other providers, data providers, interested in something like this in an interoperable format?
Right. The OCSF, one of the main things about OCSF is that to have these various cybersecurity vendors and as well as the tools developers, they are getting into the point where they want to use OCSF as the standardized format across different applications. And this basically helps almost all those vendors to start using MOQ as a transport to do that. Cullen.
To Ian's question too, I mean, I don't think this requires any changes in the base transport at all.
Yeah.
But I do think that it will have very different characteristics as puts on a relay. You'll have lots of publishers that probably most of the time have no subscribers. And when they do have a subscriber, only have one subscriber, there'll be way less subscribers than publishers.
Right.
And that's an interesting sort of use case to think about from how one's optimizing relays and those types of things. But I don't think it changes the base protocol.
Thanks.
So one comment on this. I do think that this is outside of this working group's charter, because the charter is talking about media protocols. This is not the media protocol. So, but it is an interesting question about when should the working group care about the usage protocols, etc., definitions, and when it's saying, oh, go ahead, specify it somewhere else. So I think it's the general question we need to answer, and in this particular case, I guess it's, is there another place that would be better to develop this? But yeah, let's have a discussion around it.
Cool. Thank you.
Next up is Colin on secure objects.
So last time we talked about maybe the previous time, I don't know. We talked about secure objects a while back. And we had really good, whoops. Okay. We had one messy area, which was about how we deal with the header extensions. So next slide. And so all I want to talk about, this is sort of just the same slide from last time where we're talking about what we were trying to do with the secure objects for our sort of end-to-end encryption. And none of this has changed, it's fine. Next slide. And this is the only slide of this presentation. So what we came down to last time is the previous proposal didn't really deal with encryption or integrity of the header extensions, which was identified as a lacking we needed to solve. So what I've changed this time is this is a proposal of getting into sort of the details of what we would do on this. So we're going to have 3 categories of header extensions. ones that the relays can modify. They can set and modify them. They can add new ones. A category of them which the relays can see them, but they can't modify them. And a category of them where the relays can't see them. They're encrypted and they can't modify them. Okay, so that's our 3 categories. And in classic fashion, I could ask you right now, like if anybody thinks we don't need one of those categories or more of those categories, like stand up, but like inevitably we all end up deciding we need all possibilities and make the most complex solution possible. So I've gone forward with the assumption we will at some point in time have headers in all 3 of those extension categories. So what I'm trying to say here is, and we're using AEAD encryption where there's some authenticated data and some encrypted data. And like there's the other draft and things we already agreed on dealt with things like the key IDs and the nonsense and all of those for that. Really all I want to talk about here is that the part that we didn't really nail down last time, which is how we pick out these headers and what we do with them. So the proposal here is that before we get to the step where we're encrypting some data object that we're going to send, we've been adding headers to it. We've been keeping track of which category they're in. And this draft proposes we actually have a header called an integrity marker and an encryption marker that just things that come, you know, the things that come before the integrity marker have no integrity. The things that come after the integrity header but before the encryption header have integrity protection but non-encryption. Things that come after the encryption marker have encryption. And the payload always has encryption. So we take those things, and you can see right here, what I'm trying to show is before we started the crypto, the extension header length of this packet would have been 32 of all these, and the first extensions of length 10, then there's 1, 10, 1, and 10, okay? And it's got a payload length, the payload that has a 40 in it right now because the payload length is 40 bytes. So after we encrypt, what we're going to do is we're going to have basically taken those encrypted headers and we're going to put them in the encrypted portion. So at the very bottom line of this slide, you can see some lines that say AAD input. This is the stuff that was the additional data input to the crypto. So we're integrity protecting that information. So the integrity marker, all the security extension, the extension headers that you can see but not modify, and the payload length. Those are fed in as extra data that is integrity protected. And then all of the information, then slightly below that to the right, this AED encryption, ENC encryption input, that data is all encrypted. And so that will be all of the encrypted header extensions, the length of them, and the payload data. Now, part of the reason for this, okay, and so after that, the thing that goes out on the wire is the weirdness that happens with this design that people have to understand is that after that, the extension header length is going to be represented as 21 because we removed that one encrypted header. And the payload length has sort of suddenly gone from 41 or 40 up to 73 of all these things added. So those change. So that's a little counterintuitive, but what we're trying to accomplish here is make sure that the split of information, like how much was encrypted header and how much was encrypted payload, the relay doesn't get to see what that ratio is. Okay, it doesn't see those as 2 different numbers. It just sees the total amount of encrypted data you sent without understanding how much of that was header and how much of that was payload. If that's an important property or not, who knows, but it's certainly not a bad property, right? It's you know. So that's what drove this design. I'm going to stop there. First of all, it didn't make any sense, my explanation of what we're trying to get at, of how this stuff works. Let's start with, do you understand what I'm proposing? And then we can jump into is this a reasonable design?
Oh, no, somehow reorder. Okay. Alan from Dell. So I think I understand what you're proposing here. So like, if you were going to draw the line of like, where does the MOQT payload start? The thing that's going on the wire is the bottom one, and the object starts between the orange and purple, or the payload starts where the payload length is there. Yeah, I got that.
Yeah. From the relay's point of view, after it's encrypted, it's going to see where it's the purple. It's going to see 73 bytes in the payload, and then a bunch of junk after that.
Okay. So in terms of what you need from MOQT, and this is I think what's in your PR, which is I reviewed a while ago and was trying to refresh my memory, is that this integrity marker is like a new extension type that we need to define on the wire.
Yeah,
So that a relay won't accidentally add something. Like if the relay is going to add something, it adds it before the integrity marker.
well,
Got
more
it.
importantly, when you go to decrypt this, you have to know what part of the message to compute integrity over.
Both
So you
things.
need to look at that marker to know how to decrypt it and check that the integrity is still there.
Okay.
So yeah, so this doesn't change anything in the base draft. Doesn't change anything how relays work in the slightest. It does change. It adds this extension header, which will be a single byte. I mean, it's effectively a binary one, whatever it exists, doesn't exist, right? And for anyone who's doing end-to-end encryption, I mean, yeah, then the secure object draft defines this. This would all be in the secure object draft, but it's fundamentally about some manipulation that's happening at the transport object level.
Okay. And then in the top diagram where you have this encryption marker, that does not need to be part of the MOQ standard because that is between sort of the application and wherever the encryption is happening before MOQ. Because it's gone by the time MOQ sees it.
Right. As you noted, it's gone in the bottom one, right? Yeah. So look, the encryption marker I was going to come to that one next, but it's fundamentally a discussion a little bit about how we might think about the APIs lurking for adding these headers and indicating they're encrypted or not. And so let's come to that one slightly separately.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, it's a phantom fake thing. Yeah.
Mozanetti, this is, I think, really stressing the point that we will have mutable extensions and we'll have immutable extensions. And the key question for me is whether or not we want a unified space of all extensions, and some could move between mutable and immutable depending on the time and the use case, or are they fundamentally distinct sets and all the mutables are always mutable and all the immutables are always immutable? They can be in separate registries. I think that's the key question that still lingers in my mind about whether or not we have a unified space. And so those two orange extension header things, are they all in one unified space? And depending on where you put the marker tells you whether or not, that's where you draw the cut, or are they two separate spaces? And then you don't need the marker because the actual, spaces have to be in different parts of the message. That's the key question still lingering in my mind. But I think having the marker and allowing mutable and immutable to occupy the same space and be able to be moved between the two regions based on the application and the use case, I think that seems like the most flexible design for now.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the example that came up before to do that was like trace ID, which is obviously a desirable property in lots of systems. So, some way of tracking these. In some systems, those may be immutable end to end. On some systems, those may be rewritten on the edge of one set of relays to a set of relays to a different administrative domain. So I think that was an argument for, here's something that different people might have a different opinion on whether it's immutable or not.
Will, so Cullen, we already have a payload that's immutable as far as relays are concerned, and you can encrypt it and do whatever you like in the object. And now we're allowing that payload to sort of escape into the header space. And now we have to split our header space between things immutable and not encrypted or not. Why can't we have a much simpler design where you own the payload and everything to the right of the integrity marker is part of the payload, because it can't be modified by relays. It's not for the relays. So I feel like there's this layer violation here where the encryption should go in the payload. The trace ID, for example, we use trace IDs with the HTTP headers today. They're certainly mutable, but we have working systems at scale that work with that. So I think we could implement schemes like trace ID, and we could move all of the encryption to the payload and have a much simpler header structure as a result.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So I think the important thing here is, are there headers that are fundamentally about the MOQ layer, not about what's in the payload? And I think the trace IDs even, you could have trace IDs that you're only revealing them to your endpoints, not your things. So you want them encrypted. You don't want your relays to see your trace IDs, but you want all your endpoints to be able to see them. And you want a common way to define those without having to go and modify the definition of every single thing that you put in the payload. Like every payload format would need to have a way of defining extensions in it, and then would have to have the common set of extensions to be able to run this. So I don't think our MOQ layer should be looking inside of whatever's in the payload data at all. So I'm very hesitant to put the headers that have to do with MOQ into the payload section. Now, you could point at what I just did here and say, well, Cullen, you just did that. Look at the bottom part of your slide. The encrypted portion here has like, you know, the purple, the blue, the yellow, you know, that like you've done that on what's encrypted in the wire. It's true, but that'll be decrypted at the MOQ layer, and then the payload will be handed as the original payload will be handed up encrypted. So I'm not I do think that headers that have to do with extensions for whatever the protocol is that's in the payload should not be here. They should be in the payload. But I think ones that are about MOQ should be sort of not in the payload for the same reasons. Split those two, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. I have some follow-up questions, obviously. Which portion of this is in which draft as you're envisioning it today? Because I'm feeling like the split could be odd.
I think this would all be in the OBJ crypto draft. I don't think there's any need for including defining the integrity marker.
Okay.
I don't think there's any need for any of this to be in the base transport.
Okay. So all of the authenticate section as well would be in the other draft, basically. Yeah. Okay. So that kind of goes. So it does actually kind of end up looking a little bit like Will's proposal, right? Where like basically like even though
okay, I mean I think OBJ crypto is not another protocol by itself. I imagine that OBJ crypto is something that could be used by many different things that applications that want to do end-to-end encryption. Sure. But yeah, it is somewhat in the other draft in that sense. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm just trying to figure out like the layering split. As I tend to like still keeping headers in a fixed order numerically, and so if we could make each section in a fixed order. That's sorted by the header extension ID. That would be nice from a whole number of perspectives, including enforcing things like you can't have duplicates because a bunch of our headers can't have duplicates. So anyway, just kind of throwing that in there.
I think that this is orthogonal from that. You could easily do that. Or, I mean, this obviously you'd have to say it in each of these three sections.
Yes.
But whether they're ordered in there or not, that would work fine. Make no difference.
One of the reasons we didn't do ordering, we didn't want to enforce ordering before was because I think of things like this, where we want some of them to be authenticated and some of them not to be. And right. I just wanted to point out that like it would be nice for canonicalization. Like you can actually have a canonical form of an object.
I'm a fan of canonicalization. Yes. Yeah.
But generally,
can somebody make sure I get a note in the minutes or something about Ian's comment right there?
Niels Ohlmeyer, Cloudflare. Clarifying
Good
question.
to see you.
Good to see you. Clarifying question: why did the extended header, the encrypted one, got down from 10 bytes to 1 byte? Is that just like a mistake?
Oh, over the. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, this is a typo. So, this right here.
Yeah.
That should be a 10.
Okay.
Sorry.
But yeah, otherwise, based on experiences we have made with like trying to encrypt RTP end to end, this seems reasonable in the sense to go to Will's point, like based on that experience, we learned that you need to have certain headers need to be visible to relays. We didn't have like any headers which were actually modifiable as far as I remember, so I'm not fully convinced that's needed. But yeah, otherwise, besides the typo there, looks good.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense.
I'm going to lock the queue soon. Victor, you're up.
Yeah. I guess my observation here is that first, extension headers that you relays cannot see and modify are not really MOQT extension headers. What you're really doing is like you're making your custom payload format that lets you like inject those headers into like the same space as MOQT extension headers, but they're not really MOQT because MOQT deals with things that relays can see, and relays cannot see this. You said that none of this should go into MOQT proper. My observation is that one, currently, as far as I remember, MOQT does not say anything about extension ordering. So I'm completely free to reshuffle, which will obviously break this. And the other reason this is important is that if I'm a relay and I need to insert an extension, I need to know where to insert. And if as a relay, I do not know what integrity marker is, which I would not know because you intend to make it part of non-core spec, I would not know that I'm not allowed to append to the end because that would break AAD. There are two. Like,
Victor, let me interrupt you for a second. You're 100% right. Keep going.
Yeah, so there are two possible designs I see here. One is this, and we like say that you always have to prepend basically. The second one is if you somehow communicate explicitly which are the C but not modify, you can list those, and then when you compute AAD, you can do that. So that is extremely complicated now that I think about how that would work. So I'm not sure that would work at all. Yeah, so we would have to think about that, and that is the relevant part for MOQT part. Now, to comment on something Neil said, I feel like the important distinction between RTP and MOQT is that in RTP, you have to have some headers that you have to be visible at like your SFU. And with MOQT, I feel like whenever we say that there is some extension that needs to be visible to relays, to some extent, that means we did a bad job defining MOQT, because the idea of MOQT is that MOQT features like subgroup IDs and publisher priorities should be sufficient to make all decisions relay needs to make, and any additional information from application is just a violation of abstractions that we carefully build to be able to send data that is independent of what that data is.
Did you want to reply to that?
I don't know. I hear what you're saying on the second part, Victor. That seems like an argument about when the headers are defined, whether we need them or not. But I think that the type of headers that people have inserted into many HTTP protocols that Nginx reports out that they use for management and diagnostics is a pretty long list, and we need something to sort of insert. That's the moral equivalent of we need those types of things, right? So I don't know. Maybe those should have been put in the base protocol or not. But I think that's like we need to figure that out in the headers. But I think that this scheme is still sort of flexible enough to deal with them either way. And I get your point. We're going to have to move a little bit of this to. I mean, the understanding of how you know what headers you can muck with in a relay does need to be in the base transport draft.
Please be concise, Alan.
Okay, Alan from Dell. So +1, the integrity marker needs to be in the mock tree draft. So everything that Victor said, I think we're in agreement there. The second thing is the issue that's open, the PR that does that is tied to also covers what Ian asked about, which is, do we want to specify the order to be explicitly sorted both in the first section and the second section? If we could get a signal on that, we can write a PR and close this issue.
Yeah.
Mosinati, +1, Victor, this absolutely has to be in the base draft to let relays know what's mutable and immutable. I don't think we have to do this integrity marker. We can look at other people have a different design. We can look at that, but somehow we have to be able to signify what is mutable and what's immutable so that relays know how to insert their extensions or not. I think the only way to really get there is for people to show the concrete extensions that they intend to use and to see whether or not those extensions could be either mutable or immutable, or they're always in one category or the other. That's, I think, the real concrete thing that we need for people to come forward with. And then we can, use that to inform a better design.
Mo, if I could just make one point on that too. Let's say that we said that a thing had to be one or the other, and we came across something that needed both. We just register it twice in the two different spaces, right? I mean, that's the problem. Like every one of no matter what we do here, we can solve all our problems, which makes it hard to really choose. This is sort of, 6 or half a dozen, what do you care, right? Like,
The one design decision that I would like to leave off the table is like what Will proposed about why isn't all this just payload? Why are you mucking with the headers when you're really talking about this is not payload, because as soon as you try to make everything an encapsulation of payload, you run into composability problems. RTP had this notoriously for decades. We thought, oh, SRTP will be the only transform ever, and so we just define a new profile for it. And that's the only transform. Oh, but now we have rich RTCP feedback. And we need another profile for that. And so now you have composability problems. You have to define every combination as a different profile. And then you also had PERC and S-frame and all these other transforms. And none of them are the only transform. And if you start trying to compose these, you get a combinatorial expansion that is intractable. So we need to make sure that we understand payloads should actually be the real payloads. Encapsulations or things like that can be pulled out and signaled in a specific way as a header, that's much better than trying to wrap everything as another payload opaquely.
Yeah, I think the main question here is about having a mutable extension header. I think that's a core question here. And the rest is more engineering, but I think the highest level. I heard Will had to see some +1 on that. I've commented about wanted to put it to payload, but I think the rest. So do we have a rough consensus for saying that we need to have immutable extension headers?
I mean, we previously had that.
Yeah.
I mean.
So, yeah, I think at least my reading of the room, unless we should do a poll. Should we do a poll on that? No.
I think people are still digesting this. There's a lot of implications, and I think just realized in the room that this requires MOQ changes. So maybe we should take this to the list for a little bit. But I would like to move quickly on this decision relatively, because this is an object model thing, which, as we stated before, is kind of our priority to stabilize. Alan, go ahead.
I just want to, there is a PR that adds the integrity marker. It's been up for at least a month.
Oh, pardon me. Okay.
So people go review it and see if it's okay. It doesn't specify ordering before and after. And if people are like, no, this is completely wrong, we don't, if it needs to be
We
integrity.
have another PR. Don't we have an issue or a PR on ordering? Nothing
Yes,
to do with
there's an
this.
issue about ordering, which is linked to your PR about integrity marker.
Okay, let's keep those as two separate things. I think it's good to keep those independent, but
okay,
or merge them, whatever, I don't know.
Okay, even better to the list, go to GitHub, let's argue about it there, and we will probably take this up again at one of the interims.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, otherwise, I think the implication that there will be MOQ changes for going forward in this direction is fairly clear. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we're handing off to the editors for the balance of the time. Thanks, Colin.
Okay, next slide. 12.5 minutes to do lightning round. We'll see how many we get. Okay. If you announce a namespace and then subscribe to a track in that namespace, what happens? So are you allowed to self-subscribe or self-publish through a relay? Get in the queue now. I don't care.
Well, yes, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And it would be weird if we didn't allow it.
Okay.
I don't like it. It's scary. It makes me fear all the loop issues I already fear with announce, and I don't think it's necessary. And the issue, people say like, oh, we like to use this for testing, and I'm like, sure, you could also just create another session. I have a client session and a publisher session, and with your client session, subscribe through the relay to the publisher session, which would be a much more realistic test case. So I find it scary. I would rather not. I'm already concerned about loops. This just makes it easier.
Okay, 1 for, 1 against.
I'm going to try to convince Alan there might be something scarier than loops, which is the relays having to detect and stop loops. Is actually not an easy problem to solve on a distributed array of relays. So I mean, if you're talking, if this happens on the same relay,
This is in the same session. Maybe I should have been clear.
in the same session. No, I could care less what you do. I mean, I'd say just do it because whatever, but I could care less. It doesn't matter. Just as long as you are clear that it doesn't mean what happened. This will clearly happen across 2 sessions.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And I think that was Ian's use this as a feature, right? Like if the same piece of software needs to both publish and subscribe to the same track, open 2 sessions. I can live with that. Can anybody not live with that?
Victor.
Oh, Victor, okay.
I'm not enthusiastic about like writing a thing that where like everyone is required to detect that this happens. Which like realistically, we might add some text that note that you technically could do this, but the relay can toss your subscribe request if you do this.
Okay, I will note that I have my relay prevents this, and it's literally a 1-line check. It's very easy to know. Like, is the person like, I'm trying to match the subscriber and the publisher, and I'm like, oh, whoops, they're the same. Fail.
Okay, Jörg, I think you would want to have that, especially if you have multiple publishers and you would like to have a consistent ordering of events observations that come in from multiple ones, including your own ones, depending on when they are getting sorted in a relay. So if you build something more than just media forwarding from a single source, that would be a pretty useful property to design a distributed system.
I see. So you're not the exclusive publisher on the track.
Jordy.
Yeah, totally agreed with what Ian said. So if you want to test, open another session, and it's super easy to test this in a relay because it's a single session. As you said, it's 1-line change to prevent it.
Okay.
Suhas.
We support it. It's for testing purposes. That helps. I'm okay with Ian's solution, as well as this is very relay applications implementation specific. A relay can block it or not. I don't think the MOQ transport should say one way or the other.
Just a clarifying question for Ian. Why do you think there's a loop? Like I publish an object and it comes back to me. That's not a loop. If I don't publish another object, nothing comes back to me. I'm in control of it. So I don't understand the loop theory here.
Somebody else said it, but I want to reiterate more specifically. I realized what I said was completely wrong, and that's why I came back to Mike. So if there are 2 different people publishing to this track, and I only published half the objects to the track, I probably want to see the other half of the objects to the track. So I definitely think that that's a very strong argument that we need this actually, in fact, and not just for testing, but it's actually a core part of making a bunch of the protocol.
And you think the 2-session solution is bad?
No, sorry. There's 2. You know the multi-publishers to a track, right?
Yeah. So the use case is like, okay, I'm one of the publishers. You're one of the. I want to publish to the track and subscribe to everyone else who's publishing. But I can do that.
Okay, so I still will. So I'm publishing this track on this connection. And I'm subscribing to this track on the connection. What you're saying at this point is that I get the objects that came from other sessions gets forwarded to me on the track, but the ones that I sent up don't get forwarded.
I think I don't know. Then now I'm so.
See, that's what it would need to say, right?
Do you want those objects or not? Let's say we allow you to self-subscribe and you publish, then you necessarily are getting that back. That's the whole purpose.
I mean, you said you wanted them. This is the part I don't care about is the objects you sent. Do you get the objects echoed back to you? I don't really care.
But if I don't, I think that breaks
the other objects on the same track, right?
Yeah.
Which seems really weird. I mean, how do you do that when like some of them were, I mean, if they were in the same group or something, I don't know. It seems like we might get into some really weird things where you can't drop the object.
Okay.
Mike English, Cloudflare. I assumed that this would work, and it seems weird to me to prevent it. It seems like extra work to prevent it, and it creates like weird scenarios where you have to like filter like by connection instead of just the track. So yeah, I think you should be able to self-subscribe and get your stuff back.
Mosinati, all the arguments I've heard have been thinking of an original publisher. And that's a pet peeve I have of the spec is that whenever we say publisher, some people just go into the mindset of original publisher and not realize that every relay is a publisher. And so if this is a relay to relay publisher, I think you definitely want those objects back because you're not necessarily getting those objects. You're getting, like someone else mentioned, some other sender, some other publisher coming back on that same track. So
Isn't that the loop case that Ian's worried about potentially?
it's
If
not
I
a
have
loop.
2 relays and
It's not a loop. It's a relay to relay. I asked for some specific, subscription, and anything that matches that, I expect that relay to give it back to me.
right. What if both relays both publish and subscribe on the same track, and then one of them sends an object? Doesn't it just go back and forth forever?
They both subscribe to the exact same track, and they both publish to the same track.
Yeah. Or like they receive, or like some external person publishes an object. It may create a loop. I don't
Then I don't see how the multi-session thing is going to fix that either. And you don't want to force multiple sessions across a relay aggregation, link. You force the relay to create a bunch of sessions for every track. That kind of defeats the purpose of relay aggregation links.
Okay.
Victor, please be brief. Victor?
He fell asleep.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
First of all, one thing I want to point out, if you're not a relay and you're not talking to a relay, it's perfectly fine for you to publish foobar and then subscribe to foobar, and those tracks foobar being completely different, because if you're not a relay, there's no requirements in what those contain whatsoever. The second thing is, I can imagine a case where like your original publisher and you're publishing something, and then you subscribe back, and the reason you subscribe back is that like whenever you subscribe, the relay network puts like UUID on every object, and you want to keep track of that for some reason. I don't know. That's a bit of contrived case, but it's like something I can imagine happening.
Okay, I do want to dispute your case of if you can have the same track name between a peer-to-peer link and have it be different. I think those two are in the same MOQ scope, so they have to. If they're both publishing, they better be publishing in different group IDs. Okay.
Okay, Ian Sweat, Google. I think the best way to resolve this is to allow it for now and move on, because
okay,
we probably have bigger problems to solve. I think it's ugly, but like it's not gonna. If it's the end of the world, we'll figure it out.
Okay, yeah, I think that's where I was leaning after this discussion. I don't know if the chairs read it differently or not, but yes, okay, we'll allow it. Caveat emptor.
Is there I mean, I took away one aspect of this is also there might be need clarification what it actually means, because there was some discussion about, do you get your own objects if you're publishing them in the subscribe or not? I think that's maybe.
I think the answer is you will get your own objects.
Yes, yeah, but it seemed to be some confusion or in
okay
comments here, so
I will
check that.
I will write a PR, because I think right now it disallows it, but I'll write a PR and we can have discussion there if people don't think getting your own objects is the right thing. It's probably, I don't know, you want to try one more 2 minutes?
Got 5, 4, there's a timer running for you there.
Okay, I don't know, go. Can we? No, that's not going to go in 2 minutes. Next. Yes. Should we have a way to say that somebody fetched a range that is too big for me to serve? And can we close this? Do people really want to say it? Like, does anybody really want a solution to this problem? Or can identify the problem?
I can't get in the queue, but I mean, this came up in the DDoS discussion, right? You should request like 10 million things or 10 zillion things. Clearly the thing is you're not going to get it. So what's going to happen? Like, I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, HTTP has an error code for this, which is like, does it? Wait, it has a post too large, but not like you asked for too many bytes, right? Like you asked for something big, you'll get something big. And somebody, I don't know. Is it desperate? Okay, maybe somebody else can help us resolve. 1 minute.
Well, yeah, as a CDN that gets abused by all sorts of requests, an explicit way to say the range is too large is useful, right? Otherwise it's ambiguous as to what the response is going to be. So I would like there to be an explicit fetch error to say the requested range was too large.
Okay, I think this issue also asks for a way to say what size range would be acceptable. Do you need that also?
No, that could be difficult, right? Just it's too large. Try
again. Okay.
On the chat, Mike RAD points out that HTTP is range not satisfiable.
think that's slightly different, but go ahead.
+1 to will.
Wait, +1 to who? To will. Okay. Yes, we want an error. Okay.
I think that's useful, but could we put what is the maximum in the setup message? For the connection.
Or as an advisory parameter? I think we could. I think I proposed
Yes, max bytes parameter.
But then Ian said we shouldn't do anything. Go ahead. Wait, no.
Mozanetti, remind me, didn't we have something where we could just clamp down to a smaller range if a request was broad, we could just clamp down to a narrower range?
No.
Is that just in subscribe filters, or we allowed something like
we
that?
don't have, like in fetch, when the client or like the fetcher asks for a range, the response is everything that you get exists, and everything that was in your requested range that you didn't get doesn't exist and will never exist. So no, we don't have a way to narrow what
So
you
if the fetch
asked for.
response only allowed up to its own limit, that would be a problem?
I'm not sure what I understand.
If you just impose the limit on the fetch, then the receiver of that would get only that range and not the original request. Is that an error?
Fetch is already really complicated. I don't know that we want to make it more complicated. Like, and say like, oh, you asked for this big range, but like I'm giving you this totally different range that you didn't, like a subset of what you asked for, because that's what I felt like.
Okay, so we don't want to subset the fetch.
I don't. You can just say, I mean, if we need an error code, it's like too much. You figure out, the fetcher can figure out a smaller subset and try again. I like that better than the publisher trying to figure out.
Okay.
Jordi, I wanted to correct my previous because what Ian said. So too large based on what? Objects, bytes, because it could be very different. One object, if we have 10 million objects of 1 byte, or 10 million objects of 1 gigabyte each one.
So which one do you think it should be?
I have no clue at this time because I don't know MOQ has the visibility. So, but I just wanted to say the comment out loud, see if there are other ideas.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think coming up with a limit is going to be insanely hard because it's like, how on earth will you know? I still think we can give an error code that it's too large. We did, Mo, by the way, discuss multiple times the idea of having fetch return in addition to / instead of the largest object, basically the largest object you will get in the fetch, which is different from the largest object ever seen on the
It now
track.
does that. Fetch gives you the largest. So you ask for A to B, and then it'll say the fetch response has a number which is less than or equal to B.
Right. But we also discussed at some point, like adding another number or something that basically is less than B and says, like, I'm going to give you A to A prime, which is a smaller range. Now, but it's probably, I'm not sure it's necessary, but we did discuss it. So it was not totally out loud. It's a reasonable request. I don't know if we need it, but so.
Okay.
Anyway.
So if anybody thinks we're going to write a PR that adds an error code, and that's all we're going to add, I think. If somebody doesn't like that, comment on 746. And I'm out of time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And we will be back on Thursday, same time in the morning.